Hi, my name is Chelsea. I am an Australian living in Paris and I work in the French fashion industry and I love to sew. This channel is mainly going to be about sewing and style, fashion, elegance, personal development, as well as working in the fashion industry and how to get your foot in the door. This video is going to be about how I learnt to sew and also some tips for people who want to start. I learned the basics of sewing in high school in Sydney, where we studied textiles and design, and I really enjoyed it. I learned the basics of how to thread a machine and do a plain stitch, and I made a few projects that I liked. Even though sewing was something I really wanted to pursue, I just felt quite put off by the fact that I had to do it for school, and so I think I never really tried to make my own clothes for a while, even though I really wanted to. I just didn't really know where to start, and it just felt very overwhelming, the world of sewing and making clothes for yourself. It's one thing to make a project for class, it's another thing to make your own clothes and stuff that you actually like to wear. In 2020, I started to kind of become interested in actually developing the skill. I bought fabrics and kind of played around, but I didn't know how to read a sewing pattern. And sewing without a sewing pattern is like cooking without a recipe. You really don't know how it's going to turn out. And most of the time it was horrible. And so that kind of discouraged me. And then in 2021, I discovered a course through Domestika. I think it was something like Sewing 101, How to Make Your First Dress. And I just took it step by step. They had video tutorials and a checklist of all the things I needed. And I just broke it down. I was really proud of myself to have been able to make what felt like my first dress, even though I had sewed before. This felt like something I was doing for myself. That was the beginning. I did that course. I felt really encouraged. It's not my favorite dress I've ever made, but at the time I felt really proud of myself. I took it when I was traveling. And then after that, I found a really basic commercial sewing pattern. I think I made about 3 toiles out of bedsheet fabric. So I could really get a hang of it, reading the sewing pattern and taking it step by step, knowing how it's going to fit on my body. I just let myself have as much practice as I needed before I actually made a proper dress. And then by the end of it, I was really happy with the final product. Once I got past that threshold of reading a commercial sewing pattern, it kind of felt like I had opened a Pandora box and I could just little by little start other projects. After that, I made a gathered skirt, and then I just kind of kept playing around and having fun, really. Sometimes projects would be an absolute miss and they would go straight into the toile box, and other times I would absolutely adore them. And so I really clung on to that feeling of being accomplished and proud of what I made, because that helped me to stay motivated and keep trying new things. It sounds like it came really easily to me, but it did not. There were a lot of times of frustration and feeling like I couldn't do it, and just like feeling like the stuff I was making was absolute rubbish. And maybe sometimes they were, but I just kept doing it because I loved it and I was really keen to learn and make my own clothes. And then I finished my undergraduate degree. I studied a Bachelor of Arts with a major in English Literature, minors in French and Spanish, because I used to live in Paris as an au pair, and so I always intended on coming back. I loved culture and books and literature and languages, and I think fashion somehow tied in with that, because fashion is culture essentially. And so after my bachelor's degree, I decided to go to fashion school for a year and a half. I completed a diploma in applied fashion design and technology, and it was challenging. There was a lot of paperwork, but I just really enjoyed the sewing aspect of it. You don't have to go to fashion school to learn how to sew, but I just wanted to talk about it because that is my background. The rest is history. Last year, my good friend asked me if I could make her wedding dress, and I hesitantly said yes, not knowing if I was actually going to be able to do it. And I think I made about 6 toiles before I really mastered the fit and was happy with the end result. And I was really happy with it. She looked absolutely beautiful. And I'm not gonna lie, there are still phases where I feel like I don't want to sew at all. And then there are times where I'm doing a lot of sewing. And so I love that it's not a part of my full-time job, because I think it would really take the joy out of it for me. For now, it is a hobby and something that I love sharing and talking about. Donc voila, if you want to learn to sew, I would start here. You're going to need a sewing machine. You can start by borrowing one rather than investing in one up front because they can cost a fair bit. I wouldn't recommend buying a cheap sewing machine. It's better to just borrow one from a friend and then see if you like the hobby or not, because it's just going to be more frustrating with a cheap machine. It's going to be causing more problems than helping you. So this is my machine back in Sydney. My mum bought it back in 2008 and it was pretty solid. It was pretty loud, but she did the job. These are also some great machines that I would recommend. In terms of tools, you're going to need a good pair of fabric scissors, thread, some snippers, a seam ripper, pins, bobbins, and anything else I might have forgotten here. You can find those tools in my Amazon, I've linked below. Yeah, I would really recommend this course that I did through Domestika, but also find a basic sewing pattern like a tote bag or an apron or a pillowcase. Learn how to thread a machine, learn how to do a straight stitch. Eventually, if this is something that you want to commit to, I would recommend buying an overlocker because that really helps you to create a really professional finish to your garments. It's a whole world out there. You're going to have a lot of fun. Donc voilà. Bisous.